Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. While I'm taping this, I'm looking out on a magnificent view of all the birds around the bird feeder, and it's quite a spectacular sight, especially as it's very overcast and pretty cold out there. So I do hope you're all doing marvellously well and keeping lovely and warm. If the weather has dropped and you're getting a bit colder now, do let me know about it. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with this story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, I wasn't remotely happy that me and my family were moving away from Toronto and going to live in Canmore in Alberta, Canada, known as a mountain paradise, located outside the gates of Banff National Park. It is one of Alberta's iconic towns, surrounded by towering peaks, glacial lakes, and lush green forests. It's an hour's drive from Calgary and Banff, which makes it an ideal location to be close to nature, while suburban conveniences are not too far away. I think that was the quintessential reason my father wanted our family to move to this extraordinary idyllic part of the world. My father had worked for the Canadian bank system practically all his life, and had been fortunate enough to inherit a substantial amount of money from a distant relative that he'd never actually known in life. When that happened, our lives were turned upside down in a heartbeat. It's absolutely amazing what money can do to people, how it can change the dynamics of your life quite literally, and for many it always comes as a major adjustment. Some people think that such a dramatic, fortunate change is extremely positive, rather like waking up in the morning from having been a size extra large and realizing you've become a zero. It's one hell of a change, and adjusting to your new circumstances takes time. It comes as no surprise to me, for example, that many people who win the state lottery often end up losing all their millions, rather like someone who embarks on a diet, loses a ton of weight, and then regains it all once the diet is over. It would seem that for many lottery winners, they cannot hack suddenly becoming multimillionaires, because it's embracing a lifestyle that suddenly seems almost foreign to them, which is why some of them binge on the money, going to extravagant extremes, purging it all. It's almost as if they're subconsciously so incredibly uncomfortable with their newfound wealth that they deliberately, on an unconscious level, sabotage their efforts to hang on to the money, almost as if the wealth they've acquired is like a noose around their necks, and they want to cut it away ruthlessly, as if the responsibility of being wealthy finally got too much. Me and my sister Hayley had lived in Toronto all our lives. I was Hayley's older brother, by about 2 years at the time. I was 16, Hayley was 14. We had made friends in Toronto and loved our lives there, living in a delightful green leafy Toronto neighbourhood. When my father got all this money from an unexpected inheritance that we never saw coming, everything changed exponentially in ways I never imagined possible. My father had never enjoyed his job working as a banker in the city, but he did what every man has to do when he wants to provide a living for his family, and plodded along, probably hoping that in the future he'd get that quintessential promotion. Don't get me wrong, my father earned a reasonable income, so we had a relatively good standard of living, even if I say so myself, where we enjoyed the benefits of living in suburbia, but at the same time in a neighbourhood where there were lots of lovely parks around, where you could enjoy nature on your front doorstep. Well, almost. One day my father got a call from an attorney's office in Toronto, asking him if he was Kenneth Barker, and he nonchalantly said, "Yeah, that's me. May I ask who's calling?" "Hello, Mr. Barker," came a very professional voice at the end of the line that sounded that whoever they were, they meant business. "I'm so glad to have finally found you and connected with you. Our private detective certainly did a good job in locating you. Turned out you weren't too far away." "Who are you?" my father asked, sounding somewhat perturbed, to learn that a private detective had been hired to locate his whereabouts. "I'm Mr. Adrian Hoffmeyer from Hoffmeyer's Attorneys. I was wondering, Mr. Barker, if you would kindly consider popping into our offices sometime tomorrow morning
if that's all right with you." "What is this about?"
my father asked coyly. My father hated being inconvenienced by strange phone calls that seemed to demand his undivided attention in some obscure matter, and when people weren't direct with my father, he instinctively felt as if they were hiding something.
"It's something that will be of great benefit to you, Mr. Barker," came the reassuring voice. "May I ask if you may pop around to our offices in the morning? Because I understand your bank where you work is only streets away from our offices, so it would be extremely easy for you to drop by and see us. It would probably only be a 15-minute walk."
My father had grumbled down the phone, saying,
"Can't you tell me what this is about, Mr. Hoffmeyer? I'm a very busy man. I haven't got the time to go dropping over to attorneys' offices for no good reason, even if you are only a 15-minute walk away. I've never ever heard of the Hoffmeyer attorneys before, and I've lived in Toronto a long time."
Mr. Hoffmeyer did not take any offence to my father's comments. He was probably used to difficult customers in his job. I imagine over the years working as an attorney, he had encountered his fair share of colourful characters. Much as I loved my father, he could be disagreeable at the best of times, as sometimes the stress of working at the bank could make him a little cranky. My mother would tell me and my sister Haley that we shouldn't take any notice of my father when he got into one of his cantankerous moods. "You must understand, kids. Your father works extremely hard in an extremely stressful environment. He's dealing with big challenges on behalf of the bank every day. When he comes home, he has to let off steam, and sometimes he can get quite bad-tempered. It's his way of releasing tension after a day at work. And sometimes, I hate to say this, he takes his frustration out on us, his nearest and dearest. But we must never take it personally. Your father loves us all, but the stress in the workplace has taken a big toll on him, as it would anyone in his important position, and we need to make allowances for that." I didn't know whether my mother was making excuses for my father, as there was no doubt he was a difficult man, and when my father was in one of his grumpy moods, we always kept him at arm's length. I remember one evening over dinner, my father got so mad that he topped over the serving dish of peas and carrots, which went flying across the table, and he stormed out of the dining room, marching off to his bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Me, my mother and sister stared at each other incredulously, and my mother said, oh dear, what a show that was. Your poor father has had a hard day. He's not taking it very well, I'm afraid. Things didn't go well with his business negotiation with the company, so he's taking his frustrations out on the peas. At least it's not us." So you could say I quickly learnt that my father didn't exactly enjoy the tumultuous obstacle courses he had to overcome at his job at work, and I remember thinking to myself, I never wanted to become a banker.
"I appreciate you're a very busy man, Mr. Barker," said Mr. Hoffmeyer. "But let's just say you will not regret visiting my attorney's offices in the morning. I think you will find your visit to be very beneficial." "Well, I hope you're right, Mr. Hoffmeyer," my father had said. "Just so you know, I don't appreciate being messed around. My time is extremely valuable to me."
I remember the following evening, when I was doing my homework in the upstairs bedroom, which had a prepossessing view over the street and the driveway, I heard the familiar sound of my father returning home. I glanced at the clock on my side table, thinking it must be rather early for my father to return home at this time, and I was right because it was 5:10 in the afternoon. I was used to my father returning home at 6:30 every evening, so his early impromptu arrival home was a little out of the ordinary. My father's distinctive white BMW rolled up our driveway. My dad climbed out of his car, but there was something extremely different about his demeanour on this afternoon. I couldn't work out what it was exactly. It was hard to explain, but instead of my father looking predictably weary after a hard day's work like he normally did, on this occasion he looked animated, as if someone had made his back as straight as a pencil and had put dynamite into both of his legs. My father, wearing his smart navy blue pinstripe suit like he did every day, was carrying an expensive bouquet of beautiful flowers in his arms, along with a bottle of expensive French champagne, and his briefcase was nowhere to be seen. I assumed he'd left it behind in the car, probably because he was carrying one of the largest, most beautiful bouquets of flowers I had ever seen that couldn't have come cheap, and my father was by no means an extravagant man. They were obviously for my mother, but I don't think my father had ever bought her such a gargantuan bouquet before. Was it my parents' wedding anniversary, I wondered? A special one, perhaps? My father only bought my mother flowers on special occasions. I watched my dad sashay over to the front door, looking like an exuberant puppy. I remember chewing the back of my pen, wondering what was up with my father, and then just glancing down at my homework, trying to evaluate how many more equations I had to work out before I finally completed my homework. As I was trying to concentrate on the next mathematical equation, that was when I heard my mother say, "What have you done, Kenneth? Why would you do that? Are you absolutely insane?" My mother's words jolted me out of my focus like a startled stone from a slingshot, and before I could even think about what I was doing, I had charged down the stairs, with my sister Haley running close behind me, as no doubt she had also overheard my mother's words. My mother's voice tended to carry over a long distance. What had my father done, I wondered, to cause my mother's feathers to be so badly ruffled? Is that why he bought her the flowers, to soften her up before she got too angry about something he'd done? Maybe my father was going to announce another golfing weekend away with his friend, as that usually made my mother as mad as a March hare. Or had he run a red light or something and got some seriously hectic traffic fine that might make a large dent in our finances? I couldn't think what it was that my mother was so mad about. Me and my sister stood watching my parents like a movie you might watch on Netflix. It was like my parents had become two curious characters in a play, and we were the audience, and I can honestly say that my parents didn't even notice our presence, as we both stood there in the doorway of the kitchen, just watching them, wondering what on earth was going on, and what my father had done to make my mother so irate. My mother's furious brown eyes were fixed steadily on my father. She tossed the huge bouquet of flowers at him angrily, and the magnificent bouquet dropped on the floor in a crumpled heap, but luckily none of those beautiful flowers were damaged, for they hadn't come cheap, that was for sure. My father reached down towards the bouquet, picking it up from the floor, and casually walked over to the sink, running some water in it for a moment, so that the bouquet could soak in the water. My mother stared at him, her lips turning down into a very sizable frown. "So you decided to buy me a huge big bouquet of flowers to appease me. Is that what this is about, Kenneth?" my mother said sarcastically. "Well, it's not going to work. I am mad at you. You hear me, Kenneth? I am mad. I cannot believe this is happening." Even with my mother's indignant scolding, my father didn't appear to care very much. He was all smiles, and I imagine that deepened my mother's exasperation. She continued to look infuriated, like a woman who'd seriously like to slap the smug, self-satisfied expression off my father's face. I couldn't blame her for that, because my father's behaviour was pathetically juvenile. Gone was the responsible man I'd always known to be my father, that seemed to have become possessed by the spirit of a nonchalant kid with an anything-goes mentality. It was in this quintessential moment me and my sister quickly deduced the source of my mother's outrage, as my mother shouted at my father so loudly that I almost jumped out of my skin, for I'd never heard my mother raise her voice like this. "What the hell do you mean by this? You've resigned from your job at the bank. Are you insane, Kenneth? Why would you do such a reckless thing? In case you don't realize it, we've got bills that need to be paid, a mortgage, and the kids' expensive school fees. And we certainly can't afford to pay all these things without your income coming in. Is this some kind of a warped joke, Kenneth? Because if it is, I am not laughing. I don't understand you. It's not like you to be so nonchalant about a job that provides for this family.
How can we survive without your income coming in? Did you stop to think about that for a second? What the hell has gotten into you? A little stress in the workplace and you want to call it a day? I hate to tell you this, Kenneth, but everyone has stress in their jobs. But what do? They grit their teeth and get on with it. Why can't you do the same? I thought you were like that, with the same resolute determination to brave any storm no matter what. Because you believed me and the kids were worth the sacrifice. But it seems I've got you all wrong. My father pulled a face. I told you I don't feel like working at the bank anymore. It's got rather stressful for me. I've had enough. I deserve to take it easy for a long while. Decide what it is I'd like to do with my life. I don't want to be working at the bank all my life. It's a drudgerously boring job with far too many responsibilities. So yes, I gave in my resignation today. Mr. Farewell says he's very disappointed I'm leaving the bank, because I've been such an asset to them. But you know how I feel about my job. I've had enough. I want a brand new, fresh start. You want a fresh start, do you, Kenneth? My mother practically shrieked. What has got into you? I barely recognize you as my husband right now. I might as well be talking to a perfect stranger. How dare you throw away your responsibilities, like candies on the 4th of July. You're going to get back on that phone right now, even as I speak, and you're going to tell Mr. Farewell you've changed your mind, that you want your job back right now. We need the money, Kenneth. Without your job, this family is doomed. Don't you get that? Or do you only care about feeling a little uncomfortable in the workplace? Because believe me, you're not alone in that. I can't ask for my job back, love. I've resigned now. It's too late for that, said my father almost triumphantly, looking at my mother like a kid who'd eaten the jar of cookies, stuck out his tongue to prove nothing was left, and was like saying, big deal. What do you want me to do? Regurgitate the cookies or something? It's a bit too late for that now, is it not? This time my mother was so riled up that she actually slapped my father across the cheek. My mother had never done anything like that before to my father. She was not the kind of person that was physically abusive in any way. On the contrary, my mother was a kind, gentle soul that never got angry about anything. But on this particular occasion, her disgusted face had gone red with frustration. I'd never seen her so furious. She was like a dog that had been poked way too many times and just had to snap. My father just laughed nonchalantly, as if he didn't care a jot, and his continuously idiosyncratic behaviour was winding my mother up all the more. It was like he'd given up on his responsibilities as a father and husband, and had promptly decided that he no longer wanted to provide for our family, which was so incongruously out of character for a diligent, devoted man like my father, who would have done anything for his family, and more besides. I wish I could say he was half-cut, or drunk and intoxicated or something, but he was completely sober, and in his right mind. What the hell was wrong with him? In that moment, I also wanted to slap him across the cheek like my mother had just done. Why was he acting so weird? He seemed to be thoroughly enjoying causing my mother so much upset, and the grin on his face was becoming increasingly wide. "Did you hear what I said, Kenneth?" said my mother, sounding like a headmistress giving a pupil an order mark. "You're going to get onto that telephone right now. You're going to call Mr. Farewell and tell him you are very sorry you made a grievous mistake. You resigned from your job in haste, on a whim perhaps, but you would like it back very much. I want you to apologize profusely for messing him around like this, and tell him that things just got all too much for you. You weren't thinking properly, you had a bad day at the bank, and on an irrational whim you handed in your notice, but you'd love your job back, thank you very much." "I told you," said my father. "I'm not going to do that, love. I've had enough of my job. I don't regret giving in my notice. I want to build a pottery studio and start creating pots. Maybe when I'm good enough, I can sell some of them. Bring in some good money that way, I imagine." "Kenneth, listen to yourself. You've lost leave of your senses, you really have." Are you having a midlife crisis or something? Is that what this is about? You haven't had a break for a long time. We haven't been on a family vacation for quite a while. I can understand that you're feeling a little overwhelmed at the moment. I imagine things have got on top of you. You've been fatigued lately, of course you have. But you've got to get that job of yours back. You can have a very nice chat with Mr. Farewell, I'm most sure. Explain to him that you weren't thinking properly, that you really enjoy your job at the bank and want it back desperately. I'm sorry, love, I hate to break it to you, but there is no way you can support this family by making pots in a pottery studio. You've only been doing pottery for a year now, and, quite frankly, your work is not all that good. My father's eyes grew round in surprise, as if my mother's words had hit him hard like a cruel blow. But I thought you said you liked the pots I'm making. I thought you said I was showing promise. I said that to be kind, love, to encourage you a little. But your intending to make pottery your new profession is a ridiculous idea. If that's what you think, you need to think again, long and hard. Why don't you tell Mr. Farewell at the bank that you were premature in your decision to resign? You haven't taken time off for ages, so you're exhausted. You need a break for a couple of weeks or so. And then you'll be as right as rain to resume your job at the bank. We can all go on a family vacation together, and my bet is when you get home, you'll be as right as rain, ready to conquer the world by storm. How many times do I have to tell you, love? Said my father stubbornly, like a pugnacious, belligerent kid that wasn't getting his way. I don't want to go back to work at the bank. I've had enough. I hate working there, and I don't want to waste the rest of my life doing something I don't want to do. Do you not get that? I get that, sweetheart, said my mother, trying to hide her rising level of annoyance. I know that working at the bank is tough. It's a stressful environment, of course it is. But so many people in this world do jobs they abhor in order to support their families. It's called sacrifice. I'm sure there's 101 things that such people would rather be doing, but they don't have the luxury of choice, and neither do you. Some people flip burgers or clean toilets for a living. I'm sure they don't like their jobs one little bit, but someone's got to do it, and they desperately need the money. People are grateful these days to have a job, but you don't seem to care about that. I don't know what on earth has got into you. You're being so selfish, Kenneth. We need you to work. We are dependent on you, Kenneth, to provide for this family. How are you going to afford to pay Haley and Scott's school fees? Then there's all the extracurricular activities they enjoy. You're going to have to pay those. But with no income, how is that going to happen? What's wrong with you, Dad? My sister Haley chimed in. You've got to pay for my guitar lessons and my ballet. And then there's school. You can't just give up on your job at the bank like this. We need you to work. Everybody's parents work at my school. Well, all the fathers do. And maybe they don't like their jobs, but they do it anyway to provide for their families. You should be doing the same, Dad. I'm very sorry, love, said my father, looking up at my sister. I told you I've resigned from my job at the bank. I've decided I want to become a potter, and my decision is final. My mother was increasingly infuriated by now. The exasperation she wore on her face just could not abate. She looked like a parent dealing with a very difficult, illogical child who refused to see reason. I was wondering where this was all ultimately going to lead, for there was definitely a storm brewing in our kitchen, and it wasn't a docile one. At that quintessential moment my father just keeled over with laughter, clutching his stomach. He was laughing so much. Me, my mother and sister exchanged bewildered glances between each other, wondering what on earth was going on. I think we were beginning to wonder if my father had taken some kind of drug or something to bring about this delusional behaviour, which was so out of character for him. I had always regarded my father as a man who took responsibility as his middle name. But the father I was seeing now was recklessly insouciant and didn't seem to care about the trouble he had just stirred up. At this point, me, my mother and sister were exceedingly upset, wondering what the potential future might possibly hold for us,
without a steady income coming into our home. I imagined my family becoming homeless, like some of the sad people I'd seen camped out along Eglinton Drive and Gerrard Street. Would that be our bleak future, I wondered? All because my father didn't like his job at the bank anymore, and on a whim had decided to become a potter when he wasn't even particularly good at pottery. My mother was right. His pottery was definitely a work in progress, and he had a long way to go before he became accomplished in the art, if at all.
"I had you going,"
my father chuckled, pointing a finger at my mother.
"Look at you! You look as if you've been run over by a freight train, while you kids look as white as ghosts. Your faces are so pale."
"Oh, Kenneth," said my mother, her face softening as relief washed over her, like a refreshing cool rain shower. "You've been joking all along. Thank God for that. You really had me going. You had us all going. It's unlike you to pull a prank like this on us. What's brought this on? You buy me a magnificent bouquet of flowers, bring me some very expensive French champagne. You've announced you've given in your resignation at the bank as if it's nothing, but all the time you've been winding us up. That was a very unkind thing to do. I was imagining such a bleak future for our family without you being the breadwinner. I don't know what to say. You almost gave me a heart attack."
"I'm not joking," said my father. "It is true. I have resigned from my job at the bank. I'm not stupid. I'd never put our family's futures in jeopardy. Never. Not under any circumstances. This family means the world to me. And if I had to scrub toilets to provide for us, that's exactly what I would do. I packed in my job at the bank because I don't need to work there anymore. Because we are rich. You hear that? We're rich, Polly."
"What the hell are you talking about, Kenneth?" said my mother. "I suppose you're going to tell me now that you've won the state lottery or something, so you don't need to work. As far as I know, you've never bought a lottery ticket a day in your life. You've always claimed the chances of winning the state lottery are as remote as finding a gold nugget buried in the backyard."
"Well, in a manner of speaking, you could say I have won the lottery, if you want to see it like that."
"What do you mean, in a manner of speaking? You either won the lottery or you didn't," asked my mother. "Quit toying with us. Tell us what is going on, Kenneth."
"Remember I told you I was visiting an attorney's office in the morning?"
"Oh, yes, you did mention something about it, but I thought it was to do with your work at the bank."
"No, it wasn't anything to do with the bank. The attorneys called me on a personal matter."
"What could an attorney possibly want with you?" asked my mother.
"I was asking myself the very same question," said my father. "But after I went to visit the attorneys, let's just say I went to the bank and told them to stuff their miserable job. I don't think Mr. Farewell took it terribly well when I said to him that he could stuff his job. Oh, it felt good to tell him to get lost. I can't stand the man. He's always been too big for his britches, believing he's better than anyone else. He's always ordered me around, calling the shots around the place, so it was good to tell him to get stuffed. You should have seen the horrified look on his face. He said to me, 'Mr. Barker, I think the bank values your input very much indeed, and it would be a dreadful pity if you were to leave your job. I was thinking of putting you up for a promotion.' Funny, isn't it, that he never mentioned that before until I gave in my resignation, and all of a sudden he's interested in promoting me. Anyway, I'm due some much-needed holiday leave, so I was able to leave the bank forthwith. Isn't that amazing? I feel incredibly liberated," said my father, punneling the air with his fists. Rather triumphantly, I have to say. "We're rich, love. Can you believe that?"
"You're getting ahead of yourself, Kenneth. What on earth happened at the attorney's office?" asked my mother, fixing a sceptical, rather quizzical gaze on my father.
"Well, I went to see the attorney. He told me to drop over while I was at the bank. It turns out his offices are a short walk away from the bank. I think it took me about 15 minutes to get there. I wasn't pleased to go off to see the Hofmeyer attorneys, but he said my visit would be extremely beneficial. So I thought, what the hell, I'd do it. What have I got to lose by going to see these people? The attorney's name is Adrian Hoffmeyer. When I went to see him, he told me that a long-lost relative of mine, a man called Horace Barker, living in the Hebrides in Scotland, had left me his fortune. As I'm the only surviving family member on my father's side of the family that they could trace, and so I've inherited his fortune."
"You're kidding me," said my mother. "A long-lost relative left you a fortune? I didn't even know you had any family members, let alone living in Scotland and the Hebrides of all things."
"Neither did I," said my father. "I do remember my parents talking about a man in our family living in Scotland, on my father's side, of course, who was a multi-millionaire, living the life of a pauper. Not because he was a miser or anything, but because he just had no interest in spending money. So he sat on his wealth and it gathered interest in his bank. Anyway, I suspect money just was not important to him, but everything's been left to me. When Mr. Hoffmeyer revealed this to me, I thought he was winding me up, for this was some kind of cruel joke. I mean, this sort of thing happens to other people, but never to me. I've never been lucky like that. But it turns out it really is true, and Mr. Hoffmeyer is going to transfer this money into my bank account. Well, into our bank account, should I say. When I saw the amount, well, I nearly fainted. Mr. Hoffmeyer immediately got his assistant to get me a Coca-Cola, and I sat there in the attorney's office for a long while before I finally had the strength to walk back to the bank. It took a lot for this to sink in, love, you have no idea. Mr. Hoffmeyer assured me it's normal to feel days like this. He said another woman in a similar position actually fainted. She was so shocked.
"But are you sure this is legitimate?" my mother asked, "and not some kind of dreadful misunderstanding? And the attorneys contacted the right person? I mean, never once have you mentioned this Horace Barker before to me."
"This is legitimate, love. We're rich. Get that?"
"I'm sorry," said my mother, cradling her head in her hands. "Something about this feels off. There must be some catch. How can we become rich in one day? This sort of thing happens to other people, not to our family. What if in the morning Mr. Hoffmeyer phones us up to tell us this was a big mistake? What then?"
"There are no mistakes, love. I do remember my parents talking about Horace Barker, but my memory was only jolted when Mr. Hoffmeyer mentioned the man's name, and there is no question in my mind he is a long-lost relative that I'd clean forgotten all about."
"So he really was a relative of yours?" my mother asked, her eyes growing round. My father told my mother to hang on for a moment. He made a dash out of the house. I heard the sound of his car door being opened and closed. He returned into the house with his briefcase, opening it up and rustling around in it for a large white envelope. And then he retrieved some legal papers from the envelope and showed them to my mother, confirming that we were indeed rich. Seeing the evidence written out on paper made my mother's jaw drop wide open. She kept reading the document over and over again, as if she had to assure herself that what she was reading was really real. No, this can't be right," she said, shaking her head. "It just can't be."
"It's real," said my father. "I know it takes a while to sink in, but I promise you, we are rich."
So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.